On This Week in Enterprise Tech, SDN, IRS, NAS, SAN, and pretty much every other three-letter acronym that we can think of. Also, are you getting bombarded by gamma rays? Find out next. Twight on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for This Week in Enterprise Tech is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Twight. This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 52, recorded May 17, 2013 for July 29, 2013. Alphabet Soup. This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Stash, an Atlassian product. Stash offers behind-the-firewall Git management for your source code. Secure, fast, and enterprise-grade. To learn more about Stash and try it free for 30 days, visit Atlassian.com/twit. Welcome to Twight, This Week in Enterprise Tech. It's the show dedicated to the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and the geek who just wants to know how the world is connected. I'm your host, Father Robert Balacer, the digital Jesuit, your guide to all things in the enterprise. And as always, I've brought an all-star cast, starting with one of my favorite recurring members of the Twight Riot, Mr. Lou Maresca. Lou, take a bow. Let the chat room just fill you with adoration and adulation for coming back onto the show. Thank you very much. Tell me, how are things in Microsoft world?
Doing really well. We're always on this steep release cycle that we're doing, so we're spending lots of hours at work, but we're doing really well, and CRM's looking good. So everyone will start seeing it soon.
Steep release cycle. Anything that you can tell me about without getting fired?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that are already public. We're doing a lot of spanning multiple platforms, iPads and Windows 8 devices, and so all that work makes the steep release cycles.
I like that. I like that. And you know what? This is actually episode 52. That's right, 52 episodes of Twight. We've made it the full year, so I figured what better way to celebrate than to have in studio a guest who I've wanted to have on since the beginning of the show. I've been bugging him all year, and he finally was able to make it, Mr. Derek Glover. Derek, I've known you for about 10 years. You're the master of all things storage. Yeah. Tell the chat room a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me on, first of all. I've been dealing with NAS and SAN for 10 years or so, getting into Linux open source and just having fun from there, watching gigabytes grow into terabytes into petabytes.
Right. And anyone who's ever been on the ReadyNAS forums, well, you know him. What was your call sign?
Chirpa.
Chirpa, that's right. And the man who always responded to any problem with any ReadyNAS. But you still do. And we'll talk a little bit about that later when we get into the storage part, but just glad to have you on.
Thank you.
Now let's get straight into it. We've got some fascinating enterprise bites for you. The first one is, the IRS wants to eat your free lunch. That's right. This was a story that came out a while back about the IRS debating whether or not corporate perks are taxable. Specifically, they're looking at things like free lunches and shuttle buses to work and things like Nerf games. Anything that a corporation uses to entice its employees to either stay or join the team, the IRS is saying, well, doesn't that actually count as part of their salary? Shouldn't that be taxable? Now, it would be really, really easy to go into the whole IRS is evil, this is blah, 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 blah. But there is a legitimate strategy behind it, and that is the IRS is looking at ways to stop corporations from hiding perks from executives. You know, these sort of under-the-table, off-the-book type advantages that executives get that really should be taxed because they're in the tens of thousands of dollars a year. But when it comes down to, let's say, the worker bee or even the mid-level manager, is it fair for the IRS to come in and say, hey, you know what? Those free lunches that you get at $10 to $15 or to $20 a day, they add up into thousands over years, and you should be taxed. Lou, let me throw this over to you first. You do work in a big corporate campus, a big corporate environment. What do you think about the IRS looking into the possibility of taxing any sort of freebies that you might get from Microsoft?
So, just out of sheer envy, I could say, yeah, go ahead and tax the free lunches because we don't actually get those at Microsoft. But, the Googles and the Facebooks do, but we don't actually get that. But some of the other things, like, for instance, like some of the other companies have childcare or We have what we call the connectors, the shuttle bus. It's one of the largest privately owned public transportation systems in the country. And those types of things, I don't necessarily think they should be taxed, because the whole idea behind those are the fact that, they want to save people gas, they want to save pollution, they want to save, you want to save you time. They want to save traffic. So, I mean, they're actually working for the government, really, than against the government. But I can see where some of these other things come from, from the food or even the child care. It makes sense that these perks, not available to anybody else in the world, should be taxed. And I can understand that.
Right. Dave A. in the chat room makes a good point. He says, Padre, I don't have to pay taxes on my employer contribution to my health insurance or the matching funds for my 401k. Why should I pay taxes on other employer-incurred expenses? And I get that. I mean, it's sort of like, well, this is what they do to create a good workplace. They're not going to tax you on the toilet paper you use or the water that comes to the faucet. So why would they tax you for lunch, which they use to keep morale up? Derek, you've worked at several different enterprises, large industries. What do you think about the IRS going in and trying to determine what can be taxed and what can't be taxed?
I'd say perks like that the company's paying for, Cokes and such, I want free. I'm not paying taxes. And I guess I'm a little biased too here because I'm not from the U.S. originally. I'm from Canada, so IRS is like not my favorite. Paying double taxes already. Yeah,
you're already paying double. But okay, now let me throw this back at you, Lou. It seems kind of silly that the IRS would want to go after your free Cokes, that they'd want to go after your picnic lunch, that they'd want to go after your Nerf darts.
Free massages,
whatever it might be. Whatever it is that, like Zappos, they decide that they want to keep the environment weird. They want to keep it just a little strange to spark the innovation, spark the imagination, to make it a fun place to work. But what's the difference between spending, say, $10,000 on employees over a weekend of just, debauchery, of making it fun with free lunches and parties, and, say, letting your executives fly for free on your corporate jet?
Yeah, and that's the ambiguity of law. I mean, basically, there's no real way to kind of blanket that correctly. I mean, I don't know how they're going to be able to do that. They're going to get rid of some really good stuff versus some really bad stuff. I mean, there's really no way to blanket that type.
Right. And unfortunately, this is one of these issues it's not going to go away. The IRS, no matter which way they rule on this, eventually they're going to keep revisiting this idea of, well, what's taxable, what's taxable, what's taxable. And I think we're just going to have to live with it for a while. Now, let's move on to the second enterprise bite of the day. And that is, I had to throw this in here. I've been having it in the sandbox for a long, long time. And every time I see this story, I think Hulk smash. Let me explain why. Business travelers may be getting bombarded by gamma radiation. Now, I want to read this quote. Unknown to Franklin, but now clear to a growing roster of lightning researchers and astronomers, is that along with bright thunderbolts, thunderstorms unleash sprays of X-rays and even intense bursts of gamma rays, a form of radiation normally associated with such cosmic spectacles as collapsing stars. The radiation in these invisible blasts can carry 1,000,000 times as much energy as the radiation in visible lightning, but that energy dissipates quickly in all directions rather than remaining in a stiletto-like lightning bolt. So here we have a scenario in which business travelers, people who spend a lot of time in the air, and I'm actually one of them. I think I'm upwards of 200,000 miles for the year already. I do fly through thunderclouds all the time. In fact, we fly through lightning storms. And now the research is coming out that there's actually gamma ray pulses that are being showered upon travelers. There's a study that's going to be started that are actually going to be putting detectors on planes that fly through parts of the country that are frequented by these thunderstorms. My question to you, Lou, is would this change how much you fly if you knew that at any given point you could get a Hulk-like dose of gamma ray?
And that's the thing. I mean, I think these transportation units, I mean, they're basically built to be able to withstand these electrical pulses. I mean, most devices, like for instance, airplanes, even buses, they have these capabilities of dispersing energy, using grounding techniques. So even if there was gamma radiation, I mean, it would make sense to start shielding the airplanes from the radiation itself, but not the energy or the power itself. So I don't think there's an issue there still.
Yeah. Well, what concerns me is if someone gets really, really antsy about this and starts saying, well, of course, now we have to start shielding planes from X-rays and gamma rays because, yeah, that's not going to work. Derek, how much travel do you do a year?
It's backed off a lot, but I used to be a gold member and hopping around. Now, what about airport X-rays and stuff? Are you worried about those?
I am not all that worried about airport X-rays, just because I figure that my lifestyle is going to kill me a lot faster than cancer. But gamma rays actually do kind of scare me. I mean, X-rays are one thing. Gamma does. I mean, comic books when I was a kid, gamma rays do horrible things to you, right?
Yeah.
Here's a
Hulk.
look of you.
Okay. Okay. Let's get back to a serious side of this. When we start talking about enterprise, when we talk about people who are traveling back and forth across the country a lot, if this becomes a known risk of business travel, that you know, during certain parts of the times of the year when you will be flying through storms, you will receive an above average dose of radiation. Is this something that we work into corporate compensation policies? Do you get hazard pay for flying back and forth 52 times during the winter? Let me throw that to you first, Lou.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, people are going to start being afraid. And the only way they're going to be insured that, they're going to be able to be safe is if somebody's paying for it, whether it's their health insurance or if it's the company insurance or whatever. So that would make sense that, people want to stay away from it.
Yes, and to CR1 in the chat room, note, gamma ray is definitely not a perk. I want to give you the last word on this, Derek. If your employer told you, we're going to require you to fly across the country 52 times a year, half of that time you will probably receive an above average dosage of gamma rays, would that affect the way that you hire or accept a job at all?
Totally. I'd expect compensation for that. Yeah, as well as what about pre-existing conditions now with your life insurance or your health insurance?
I
leave that job, go to the next.
Not expect
they're not going to insure you because of that.
Okay. All right. Well, there you have it. We want more coverage.
Geico, get on that.
Geico, yeah. Where's the lizard? Let's go on to the Enterprise Bite number 3. And this is a story that I've been holding in my back pocket for a while. I really, really like it because it strikes at the heart of what I, as an engineer, a guy who puts together things like Interop, I fear the most. And that is the story from InfoWorld about how a $1 part brought down a multi-million-dollar data center. Now, you got to read this. We're going to make sure it ends up in the show notes. But the really cool thing about this story is that you've got this state-of-the-art data center using IBM parts, and it's got the greatest and the latest of everything. It's supposed to have double, triple, quadruple redundancy. And even with all of this super high tech, there's one worn sensor that when they close the rack door, it shuts the whole data center down. It's a great story of how technology can actually fight itself. Let me give you a synopsis. You've got this data center administrator who's bringing in IBM techs because they can't figure out why they're getting faults in their logs. And the IBM techs are explaining to them, look, this is impossible. The system that we created for you, it can't go down. It can't shut down. The tech comes over, opens up the door, looks at everything, plugs in his laptop, says, see, everything's fine. And when he closes the door, boom, everything shuts off. What they find out is that it was an environmental sensor in the door that, because it had shorted, it was actually sending a signal to the environmental controls telling the rack, you're on fire. That's right. So the rack thought it was on fire, so it did what any rack should do, and that is it smashed everything in order to try to preserve the equipment that was left. Lou, we hear stories like this every once in a while, but they almost become myth. There is this expectation as we move more and more into the cloud, as we move more and more into redundant systems, that no single part can take down what I've built. Stories like this kind of bring us back down to earth. Have you heard of anything similar at, say, the Microsoft campus?
I mean, obviously, heat is the #1 violator of killing any type of storage-based system or any type of server-based system in the area. So, I mean, we had issues where, these small little sensors, maybe there's a light too close to them, and the coolant system kind of like overkills and then ends up killing the power in a data center. And I have seen that before. So I mean, there's still issues around that, and obviously these fail-safe systems or fail-over systems are kind of there for a purpose. And so it's tough. It's like testing. It's like an unknown testing environment sort of thing. And you can just have to throw it in all types of situations.
Right. Well, that's the sort of catch-22, and that is if you've built the smarts into the system to be able to anticipate any particular problem that might occur in a data center, fire, flood, surge, whatever, you also have to build smarts into the system to trust the sensor data that it's receiving. Well, if the sensor data itself is faulty, then the system can eat itself. Derek, You've also worked on large systems before. The common term is garbage in, garbage out. If I'm getting bad data, I'm going to make bad decisions. What can we do to try to mitigate that? I mean, is there a way to keep a $1 part from bringing down a multi-million-dollar data center, or is this just where we can expect human intervention to be needed?
I'd say we need failover at that point, fall back, check other sensors. In this case, we can make RATs, redundant array temperature sensors.
Rats? Tell me about your rats.
More than one sensor on the door, say on the back door. That should not have happened at that scale, really.
Right. Yeah, I actually, and again, this is one of those hindsight things where you think, well, if you have a command, if you have the ability to smash a rack, to bring it completely down, you probably should have had it check on a couple of other sensors first. Look out the rack, look outside of the rack. Say, are any of the other temperatures also showing me that they're on fire? Because if they're not, there's probably no fire in the data center. But again, that's not something that we know until it's actually happened. And, Lou...
Sometimes too fast.
Exactly. Too fast.
Yep.
Too fast.
Yep.
Any final words on our Enterprise Bytes, or should I move us on? Gamma ray radiation, IRS taxing us, multi-million-dollar data centers going down. You're a distinguished panel.
IRS building temperature sensors.
IRS will build temperature sensors that will protect us from gamma ray radiation. There you have it, folks. That's the end of the Enterprise Byte. Now, coming up, we're going to talk all about SDN. I've got an exclusive interview with the Senior Vice President of HP Enterprise Networking. But before then, I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about our sponsor.
We're in the middle of a digital economy. And let's be honest, if you are a high-tech company, you are a high-tech company writing software. And gone are the days where a single developer, a single programmer writes your software. It's always a team. So the question is, how do you make sure your team is on the same page? How do you make sure your code is all the latest version? That's why I'm happy to welcome Atlassian to the Twiat Riot. Stash provides a central place to create and manage Git repositories hosted on your own servers. It's the place where all distributed code comes back together, where you can find the latest official version of your project and keep track of code activity. Now, Stash significantly reduces maintenance and gives IT administrators flexibility to control user management and permissions. It's your servers, your rules. Stash supports your growing Git repositories within the safety of your firewall. Stash's traceability and integration points allow teams to follow their code from development all the way through delivery in one easy system. Now, we all know that development isn't just about coding. Teams using Stash can quickly get a handle on which branches are affected by a particular bug and who's working on the fix. It can be a struggle to bring new technology trends to a large enterprise, but Stash enables teams to embrace Git using existing environments and authentication with fine-grained permissions and code traceability. Enterprise teams, all within the safety of your firewall. Now, enterprise code can be complicated, but administration is simple with Stash. You create a project, add Git repositories, and assign permissions all in a matter of seconds. You can avoid the overhead of managing Git for your team with an intuitive interface to add users and groups, create and manage code repositories, and use a single logical project structure. Stash fully integrates with Jira, also an Atlassian project. Understand what issues were fixed and what code changes fix those issues. You can track the progress of work being done on Jira issues. In other words, you can use Stash to work the way you want to work. Now, here's what we want to do. If you are a code developer, if you're looking to program with a team, we want you to go to Atlassian.com/twit for more information on Stash. You owe it to yourself as a developer to try it out. Monthly plans start at $10 per month for up to 10 users, and you can try it free for 30 days. Remember, Atlassian.com/twit. That's Atlassian.com/twit, and select Stash. And we thank Atlassian for the support of This Week in Enterprise Tech.
And now for the Twiat Riot, we have a special treat. I got at Interop an exclusive interview with Bethany Meyer, who is the Senior Vice President and GM of Enterprise Networking at HP. Now, I will warn you, this interview is a little bit markety, but listen because there are some nuggets of pure gold. Here we go with the data center. I'm Father Robert Balasaire, the Digital Jesuit, host of Twiat, This Week in Enterprise Tech on the Twit Network. We're here at Interop Las Vegas 2013 at the Mandalay Bay Convention Center, and I'm joined by an absolutely fantastic panel, starting with Bethany Mayer, who is the Senior Vice President of HP Networking, and Gabe Abreu, who is the Senior Vice President of Global Enterprise Services. Thank you very much for coming on to talk to us.
Thank you.
Now, Bethany, HP just had a fantastic, I'd say, field-shattering announcement. What exactly was that?
Well, we made a very large announcement with a blockbuster lineup of data center products that are SDN enabled. So what's really exciting about these, in addition to the fact that they're very high performance, high density, high throughput, and capable for the next generation of networking, whether it's enterprise or cloud, they're also SDN enabled. So that, combined with the controller that we offer, essentially provides the elements that you would need to have an SDN-enabled data center.
We didn't want this just to be another talking head panel, so we actually brought in one of your customers. Gabe, you don't work for HP.
No, I do not.
No, you actually deploy their solutions, and you were telling me before we started shooting, you just made a major deployment with HP services. Tell me a little bit about it.
Absolutely. Well, the MPD Group, which is a company that I work for, I had a great opportunity to have a greenfield installation of a brand new data center, about 6,000 square feet. It's a state-of-the-art facility, and one of the state-of-the-art features that we put in was obviously the selection of HPN networking with all of its capabilities.
Why HP? There are so many other providers out there. This is a really, really big game. What drove you to work with HP, and how long have you been working with HP?
Well, one of the great things when you're starting a new data center, such as the one that we did, is you really have a clean slate, and you really start to look at not only features, but building blocks that you'd like to build into your architecture going forward. The scalability of the HPN networking, the reliability, resilience of HPN networking, and also the SDN capabilities that will really set us up for future deployments was really one of the key features that why we chose HP.
Bethany, how has SDN changed the game? Because it really rolled onto the field this last year. There's been a lot of talk about moving everything into a virtualized infrastructure. SDN is part of that game. HP seems to be jumping in early. Why is that, and what do you foresee changing in this IT field over the next year?
Well, SDN is a huge paradigm shift, and it is a big sea change for the network, because basically over the last 30 years, we've been building networks in a manual fashion, meaning we literally go around box by box, reconfiguring the network, and it's a very static network. It's also very fragile, because as you're trying to make these manual changes to each of the switches, you can make mistakes because you're coding thousands of different CLI commands into the devices. So the issue has been that the network, from a business perspective, has caused the business to slow down and has not allowed the business to make changes to the network infrastructure or the broader infrastructure as a result of the amount of time it takes. So SDN provides this new mechanism to control the network from a single logical location to really be able to make those changes necessary whenever and wherever needed in an immediate manner, and to automate the network so that there aren't people out there having to program device by device anymore. And that's the significant change. And yes, HP has jumped in on this early, but we truly believe this is the way forward for networking, and that's why we're a big fan of it.
Gabe, let me ask you about this, because there are a lot of engineers who are playing with SDN right now. What have you seen in actual deployments when looking at SDN? Where are the cost savings for you?
Well, from our perspective, really SDN is table stakes. It really is a feature that any new network deployment must have, and will be the wave of the future for network architectures. In the case of HP, we're heavily reliant on IMC for configuration. We hope that that's really going to be a springboard for new SDN applications as they mature and become available in the market.
Bethany, I want to give you the last word here. What do they need to know about your announcement? What do they need to know about that announcement affecting them? In other words, what do they need to know about HP?
Well, HP is all in on the data center and on SDN. And the announcement really made that very clear. I mean, we're offering now our new virtual switch, our new virtual router, our new 11900, which is an end-of-row switch, as well as a core switch, the 12900, that's primarily for very high-end or cloud instantiation. So this is a huge vote of confidence around the data center, the changes that are going to happen in the data center. And we have basically put all of our resources around ensuring that what we provide for the data center will last for a very long time and will provide value and automation throughout the course of the next several years to come.
I'm Father Robert Baldassare. This is Interop, and stay tuned because we've got more. Thanks again to Bethany Mayer for taking time to talk to me at Interop, to talk to the Twilight Riot. It was an absolute pleasure to talk with her, especially off camera, where she was able to get more into the nitty-gritty of what SDN means for HP. Lou, let me throw over to you first. SDN is one of these things where it kind of took the networking world by storm and by surprise, really. The networking world doesn't move that quickly. We like our standards. We like to get things hashed out before we really move into the next thing. But SDN, specifically with OpenStack, OpenFlow, and then whatever proprietary implementations every major manufacturer has really become table stakes, as Gabe mentioned during the interview. If you don't have an SDN solution, you're really left in the dust. Tell me, have you seen anything happen like this before, where a standard has come in and just taken over and become the de facto?
I mean, there's been a couple in the history, but I think this is one of the big ones, because especially around multi-tenant cloud, being able to support the flexibility, reliability around multi-tenant cloud, handling virtual networks and dynamic switching and isolation, performance. I mean, these are the things that just kind of pushed into requirements, and kind of like some of the new standards with HTML, like we needed video, we needed audio. Let's push that in the standard. So there's lots of things like that. They're just, the need is kind of pushing it into the standard.
Right, right. Now, there are still some people out there who don't really understand what SDN is, software-defined networking. We've mentioned it a few times here on Twilight. We've tried to describe it. We've tried to explain it. But I think in its simplest form, SDN is, as Bethany mentioned, it's a move away from the traditional way of networking. And in the traditional way of networking, what would happen is if you need capabilities in one part of the network, you need to add services, you need to add capabilities, you would buy something and you would have your IT people install it, and that's your box that does X or Y, whatever it might be. SDN actually allows you to take a common pool of resources, be it server power or switch power, and then on the fly, dynamically, with just a couple of commands, make it do whatever you want it to do. And the nice thing is it's an outcropping of what we've come to expect from the cloud. Derek, you've played with SDN a little bit. What have you seen that really makes SDN a necessity rather than an oddity?
Well, previously you had fixed routes, fixed capacity on switches. Now you can adjust that on the fly. You need more bandwidth on one side or the other. One biggest part I like is vendor interoperability. So now you can see all these different vendors, Arista, NEC, HP switches, all in one overview, and you can manage them all together. Before you had your Cisco switches, your Juniper switches, you had to log in separately and manage. Now that goes away.
Right. What I like about this is, for example, we worked with Avaya at Interop, and they called their implementation Fabric. It's Avaya Fabric. It's their shortest path bridging. And the whole idea is you could have dozens, hundreds, thousands of Avaya switches, but to the Fabric, it only looks like one single switch. You have a big pool of switches, and you have one central command line from which you can send your configurations. Now, the cool thing about that is in the old style of networking, you would hop and hop and hop and hop from switch to switch to switch to switch until you find your destination. But when you take the controller out of the switch and you allow for shortest path bridging, you allow for software-defined networking, you basically hop into the network and then you hop out of the network. Much faster, much more efficient, and much easier to reconfigure. Lou, I think I cut you off. You wanted to say something?
No, I just wanted to, he talked about extensibility. I mean, these are one of those things, making things extensible, allowing things to kind of extend the functionality. Like, for instance, you can monitor traffic on a virtualization network. You can integrate switching, special switching into it. I think that's kind of the key to SDN. Right.
Now, Lou, I do want to ask you about this because there is a big interlink between software-defined networking, cloud computing. All of these things are really the same pony show. just different parts. You need software-defined networking in order to fulfill the promise of the cloud. You need OpenFlow and OpenStack in order to make the network equipment responsive enough to be able to do what you wanted to do when you're moving your services around so quickly. What does Microsoft have up its sleeve in terms of software-defined networking, especially when looking at VDI?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the biggest things in Windows Server 2012 is, Hyper-V network virtualization. Like the ability to kind of create multi-network networks, shared physical networks, being able to kind of dynamically switch your software-defined networking policies for multi-tenancy. And that's kind of the key with the cloud computing is multi-tenancy and creating these virtual networks around, to kind of run on top of these physical networks that are, they're kind of, undefined sometimes and variable. And you get your own IP addresses and you can control the traffic and the bandwidth policies. So that's kind of the key, and that's what kind of where Microsoft is actually focusing on is, especially for things like Windows Azure, you need to be able to handle these multi-tenants that just come up and provision a system right away, and that's kind of where software-defined networking comes in. It allows you to kind of like virtualize all of that network topology and so on.
Right. We've definitely not seen the end of SDN, software-defined networking. It's going to be everything. Everything will have to be software-defined in the future. So the only question is, which manufacturer is going to find the standard that everyone else uses? This time we're going to talk all about your storage world. That's right, NAS and SAN. The differences, what you want, what you need to get, and what you need to know. And to help us, I've brought in a storage expert, Mr. Derek Glover. Derek, thank you very much again for coming on.
Anytime.
Now, you've been doing storage for as long as I've known you. And the nice thing is you've got crossover experience. You started doing a lot with NAS companies. You moved into sort of the SAN arena. Now tell me, what's the difference between a NAS and a SAN? That's something that the chat room will always ask.
It goes a lot between a file system on the NAS. You have your CIFS and NFS protocols. You're all files. Whereas SAN is block devices. You'll have your local disks. So NTFS, via iSCSI. It's NAS is more for the Windows file sharing level. You want to drag and drop Excel sheets. You want to do that. SAN is more your virtualization levels. You got your ESX talking to it, creating a VMFS, and dropping tons of VMs. Could be massive, up to petabytes, really.
Right. Now, in the past, it used to be that NAS was, well, that's the play array. I mean, you get a NAS if you want to keep a couple of photos at home, maybe have a terabyte or two of storage. And SAN was for business. I mean, SAN had a big price tag attached to it. You would get a SAN if you need to do video work or transactional work, something really, really fast, really, really oriented towards performance. But that's changed over the year. Can you talk a little bit about the convergence of the NAS and SAN arenas?
I'd say with open source technology in the last few years, it's brought the SAN down to the NAS level. So you have your pricing now is much affordable for small, medium business, even home users. I'm running a NAS at home right now that has about 12 terabytes on it, which has SAN capability as well. So I want to do iSCSI to a ESX machine, my crazy home lab, I can do that. But then I'm still streaming movies to my TV at the same time. Right.
Lou, you also have a NAS in your house, right? I mean, I got to imagine you've got one.
Synology, man.
Synology, right. And did you have an early version of a NAS? I mean, I had one of the earliest NASs, and I remember thinking how cool it was that I could access it over my network and how I could have it in a closet, and any computer connected to my network or any computer I allowed into my network could access it. But I remember that first generation being incredibly slow. Where does your Synology fall in that spectrum?
Synology, I mean, this unit is amazing. It's got 4 by gigabit ports that are aggregated. It's got failover, mirroring, replication capability. It's got 48 terabyte capability. I mean, it's eons beyond what it used to be. From these standard little mini devices that would plug into your network. So.
Right. Now, speaking of Eons Beyond, this is one of the first devices. That was actually pretty high end when it was released. This is an Infront. That's right, Infront. Before it was bought by Netgear, an Infront NV Plus. It was a 4-bay array that could run in their X-ray system, so it was automatically expandable. Very cool device. It had a gigabit out port. This one has seen better days. It's kind of naked at the moment, but it was a very cool piece of tech that really introduced the masses to affordable NAS. Now, the fun thing about this was once people got a taste of NAS, they started asking, well, why can't my NAS perform like a SAN? And over the years, we've seen more and more devices, some of them not much bigger than this, that can actually do many of the things that were expected only of a SAN, but in a box that cost 1/10 of a SAN. Derek, do you want to talk a little bit about that trend?
I'd say a lot of it's with the Linux open source, especially the home consumer NASs, the Infront, Netgear, the Synology QNAPs. Looks like here's some videos you've filmed in the past. Really bringing the cost down to sub $1,000 has enabled a lot of people to run it in the home now. And even small businesses now are able to hop on it a lot more. Before they were stuck with Windows file system or Windows file server, which was limited to one aspect really. Now you can take it across very many things.
Pretty much anything, right? Yeah.
You can DLNA on your TV, Windows file sharing backup. Now NASs actually have become widespread. They replace everything in your house into one device. So you can do cloud backup, you can do your TV streaming. You want to share files with grandma, you can do that too. It's just everything's become one device and unified. Yeah, it's a unified storage device. You keep all your digital memories, all your digital files in one place. Now, the cool thing about when I started getting into the ReadyNAS line, and I got really, really into the ReadyNAS line, was that the same devices that could share my photos, that could stream my movies to my TV, my Xbox, whatever it might be, also started having some serious performance behind them. In fact, I have a couple of 42s and a 5200, the big, rack-mounted devices that have 10 gig interfaces, dual 10 gig interfaces, and they're just screaming fast. And I actually use that to do direct video editing. In the past, I was told that could only be done by a SAN. So again, I ask you, looking at a SAN, I've always been told that the opening price was something in the range of a couple of tens of thousands of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Whereas a NAS, you can start with sub-$1,000 and you can move up into the $10,000 or $20,000 range, depending on what kind of capabilities. But I'm not seeing a big disconnect between what I can do with a SAN and a NAS anymore, because I can do block-level access on a NAS now, what I used to only be able to do with the SAN. I'd say it's just everything's converged for sure at that level. Sorry, I just had a brain fart. IRC distracted me for a second.
You know what? I forgot to tell you about that. IRC, they're trying to kill you. So you may not want to stare at them. Yeah, let me throw to Lou for a second here. Lou, you probably you work off of a SAN at the corporate office, right? I mean, everything is connected via a SAN. I'm sorry, Lou, you're muted.
All of our code replication and our code repositories and stuff all off SAN.
Right, and they wouldn't go with a NAS because why?
I think basically because they need to geographically have remote pools of storage devices, and so they kind of go with the SAN side of things because of the fiber network and so on. But I think, like you said, NAS is getting there. So they've already had that there, and so they're kind of continuing to use it, but not stopping them from using NAS kind of thing.
Right.
So since SAN is typically block level, the features and added block level replication across regions. You have your snapshots. That's one thing that's missing a lot in NAS. So that's where you're going to see a big market change shortly. Along with, you have SDN coming up there, software-defined networking. You have software-defined storage at the same time.
Right. Actually, let's talk very briefly about that, because software-defined, as I said, the software-defined is going to be the future of everything in networking. How would software-defined storage work? So as you dynamically allocate resources, you allocate server resources and network resources. How would that work for allocating storage resources?
You'll have many pools of your storage, petabytes, say, and requests come along from different departments that you need 10 petabytes here, 20 there. You can dynamically just click a button and it's done, or have it dynamic. You no longer have to say, this is a fixed array of RAID 5 and this is a RAID 6, and now you have to reconfigure and dump everything. It's all on the fly.
And everything happens on the fly, which actually I'm seeing more and more of that even in some consumer NASs now. Let's move on really quickly, because I don't want to bog down too much into the SAN versus NAS battle, because we understand that there's a place for everything. Lou, let me start with you on this one. What do you think is the use case of each technology? So you have NAS in one corner, you have SAN in the other corner. Which fits where the best?
Yeah, so I think one of the big uses of obviously NAS is, just like he keeps saying is, if you care about the files, stick with NAS. If you care about block level access, you want high speed, you want SCSI, you want a RAID, you want to you have a high speed network. SAN's kind of like where you should kind of be looking. But with NAS, if you just care about the files, if you care about sharing, you care about data storage, then it seems like NAS seems to be the use case for that.
Derek, what do you think about that? I mean, yes, so we've got this as our NAS. We've got this as our little, just care about the files, just care about putting it someplace where other people can access it. Is it really simple as that? If you're only caring about the files, you go with a NAS. If you care about block level access, you go with the SAN. Or does it get more complicated?
It does get more complicated, especially these devices are RAID level, so a redundant array of independent disks, but there's not true backup there.
Okay. Well, what would you say about PH in the chat room, who says SAN is dead? Is SAN dead?
The traditional SAN is dead.
Okay.
But the new SAN is not.
Okay. Oh, all right. So let's talk about the new SAN. What does the new SAN do? So as the NAS has usurped some of the features that had previously been reserved only for SAN, so now it can do block level, it can do blazing fast access. What does the new SAN do that the NAS can't?
Well, you'll see some of the chat room, they say ZFS. It's a new open source file system originally developed by Sun that has all these features built in: snapshots, replication, offsite dedupe, compression. That has brought it down to the home level or small, medium business. That's what's made it affordable.
Okay. So in other words, the things that you would need to do when you have an enterprise-wide storage system, that's what the new SAN excels at.
Yeah, the old mainframe days of IBM or even the NetApp EMC, it's gone. As actually, EMC not last week announced they've gone SDS as well.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this then. Here's a follow-up question. Knowing now that that's the new delineation, that NAS has basically taken over up to enterprise, and now you've got this new level, the new SAN, the new ZFS SAN. What are the deciding factors that an IT manager should keep in mind as he's deciding whether or not to pay for a NAS or a SAN?
Well, you can go into the whole buzzword of CapEx, OpEx. Back in the day, your capital expenses, that's one part of it. Cost is a big factor for sure. Support and reliability, you need to have that 24/7 if you need it for any issues that arise. Really, a factor of everything. Performance, you got that triangle usually of cost, cheap, faster.
cheap, faster, faster, expensive. Yeah,
exactly.
Where you fall in that triangle.
So,
yeah. That's actually a good way to start it off with. Lou, let me throw over to you. What practices do you see IT managers needing to take as they start deciding on how they're going to size their storage needs?
So yeah, I mean, it depends on multiple things. Like he was just saying, performance is one of the big things that they have, and supportability around mirroring, replication kind of thing. And a lot of the consumer level NAS systems are even getting there today. So I think interfacing, like for instance, some NAS devices, they have only specific types of interfacing, for specific types of devices, SATA versus ID versus SCSI. With SAN, you don't necessarily have that problem. So I mean, that's the kind of things you kind of have to determine whether you want to be able to tell which one you want.
Right. All right. Let me move on to another question. And let me throw this back to you, Lou. That is this. I get an awful lot, way more than I should, IT people who tell me, oh, well, my backup is my SAN or my backup is my NAS. And I always cringe when I hear it. It's the same feeling I get when people tell me, oh, well, my cloud storage is my backup. That doesn't count, right? I mean, you understand why a SAN or a NAS isn't your backup storage, yes?
Definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, we like I was saying, our code repositories are on SANs, and if you only had one, take down that network and even those devices, and it's gone forever. I mean, we never have the source code again. So, I mean, Leo always says, 3 ways, hard disk, backup hard disk, cloud storage. I mean, that's the same way with businesses. They always have to have redundancy with storage. So SAN is not always your backup device.
Right. Derek, let me throw this over to you. I'm remembering one quote in particular. I had a IT manager who told me, oh, yeah, I believe in the rule of 3-2-1. That's why we run our NAS in RAID 1. So it's mirrored the drive. So we have 3 copies of any given data. And I just smacked my forehead. Can you explain to anyone who may not understand why just having multiple copies in the same array does not count as a backup?
Well, like in RAID 1, it's a mirror of the disks, which is great if one physical disk fails, but if someone does something stupid like deleting a file, it's gone off all 3 disks.
Right. So it could be disaster recovery, but it's not stupidity recovery.
Yeah.
Okay. So we still believe in the rule of 3-2-1. 3 copies, 2 different medias, 1 other location.
I'd say we can go more than that these days. Some file systems actually have built-in copies of themselves, so you can have a 10-3-1.
Yeah, why not? Exactly. Yeah, it seems as if as the storage gets cheaper and as it gets easier to access, I think the backup paradigm should be expanded. The hardest thing to do, however, when you have all those different types of backup is to make sure that your revisioning is done properly, which, as you mentioned, might be an advantage of SAN.
That's where snapshots come into play.
That's where snapshots come into play. Okay, I get it now. I get it. So let me go back to you about the SAN versus NAS in terms of, let's say, the young IT person who's sizing something out for his enterprise. Let's take the Twit brick house. We've got a SAN running in our basement. It's only a few years old, but we could probably get away with a NAS, with a high-performance NAS with a couple of drives in it. Why would we go with SAN versus NAS, or why would we go with NAS instead of SAN?
Well, say for you guys, probably video editing is your primary function.
Right.
So you want to have iMovie, just say as an example, editing on a local disk. SAN lets you talk to a local disk. It doesn't know that it's down in the basement. Whereas NAS is going to be a file you have to copy back and forth. You can't edit that in between each little block.
Right. Let me throw back over to you, Lou. When you are thinking about, let's say your backup plans and then your deployment plans, what comes into mind when you're thinking NAS versus SAN?
Yeah, I think that was one of the perfect examples. He said, when you're actually editing a file and are you editing locally on your disk? Is your hard disk going to fail? Did you forget to copy it? That kind of thing. So I think that's where SAN comes into play, and for sure. And that's kind of where our stuff when we're coding things, either at work or even at home, is, am I editing the copy that's on my machine? Whether there's lightning storm, is it going to die? What's going to happen? Versus, I'm just going to copy a bunch of movies that I've downloaded from iTunes or something, and I'm going to copy them to my to my NAS so I can view them on all my TVs, kind of thing. Do I really care if those die? Yes or no, but I mean, at least I'm if it happens in between, I can just recopy the file, kind of thing.
Derek, I want to give you the last word on this for the executive out there who might need some wisdom from someone who's been doing this for a long time. What missing piece of information do you want to hold out to them? What is the thing that you think, look, before you make a decision on NAS, on SAN, or how much you're going to spend on your storage, this is the one thing you absolutely need to ask yourself about your endeavor, your enterprise, your network. What is that?
I'd say, well, first of all, you have to know RAID is not a backup.
Okay.
So be prepared. If you're going to have enterprise critical files here, you must have redundant systems. So that's first. Then you have your cost performance breakdown off that. I'd say just start looking around. You have great blogs like from your site that show in previous NAS and SAN systems. We'll have some links here in the article, I imagine, after the end of the show that will have some more tips where to go and get stuff. You can follow all of us on Twitter, get that information. I love to throw stuff out there. IRC today, I'm going to give these guys a few tips as well after the show.
Okay. Now, before we go, I wanted to share one little enterprise geeky thing. In honor of our 52nd episode, I thought we had to show something that might be a little fun for your IT people out there, and that is an Apple SMC backdoor. This was brought to us by Derek. Derek, you want to explain what this is?
Well, I only recently found out Wednesday there's an event called No Such Con, which there's a speaker there that showed Apple's system management controller has a backdoor in it where you can enable keys on there. And tying in with our picture of Chad there earlier, It's actually a Harry Potter spell, a Specialist Revelio, I believe, which enables you quite a few little secret things in the system.
That's right. So we're going to put this into our show notes. There is a way to use that Harry Potter spell in order to open up the SMC on Apple's interface. It's a very, very cool backdoor. It's a very cool hint. It's out there, but something for an IT manager to use the next time you want to poke fun at your Apple comrades. Now, I want to thank you again for using up another hour listening to Twiat This Week in Enterprise Tech. We are the best dang enterprise podcast. No, I'm not a podcast. We're bigger than a podcast. The best dang enterprise show in the universe. That's right, universe. I polled the universe, and they came back with us. And it's all because of you. Now, of course, I want to thank my panelists, my guests, starting with you, Lou. Lou, thank you for pitch hitting, for coming in here and being a co-host. It's always nice to have you on the show. Let me give you your 60 seconds. What do you want to talk about? What do people need to know about the Lou Maresca?
Well, yeah, it's always great to be here. Thanks for inviting me again. Check out Dynamics CRM coming soon to the device near you. We're looking out. We're looking soon to come out with some cool stuff. And if you're in the business for some CRM systems, definitely take a look.
Absolutely. Derek, again, thanks for driving all the way up here. It's nice to have you on. I've been wanting you on for the longest time. And you are my guru for storage. So tell the Twiat Riot, now that you're officially a part of it, what are you doing? What are you up to? What should they know about Derek?
Well, they can find me on Twitter for my usual little tech talk, a lot of storage stuff. In the ReadyNAS community, I'm a big evangelist there. So if they have any questions on that, I love to help as much as I can. I say, just poke around Twitter there. My handle's right below. You can find me. Some things about bacon in there too, which is all good.
Right. So if you want to know anything about bacon or storage, hit up Revelize. That's right. I also want to thank everyone here in the building, starting with my super producer, Karsten Bondi, but also my TD. Now, Jason, let me ask you this question. We've talked a lot about enterprise stuff, but there is a big trend towards BYOD, specifically Android devices coming into the enterprise. I'm wondering if maybe the Twit Network has a show dedicated to teaching people how they can get the most out of their Android tablet or phone.
Yes, about the Android part. Not quite so much about the enterprise part and the BYOD necessarily. It might come up here or there, but you can check out all about Android at twit.tv/AAA. Check it out.
Check it out indeed. Now, as always, you can subscribe to Twiat. That's right. You can have all the goodness delivered into your boxes automatically each and every single week. Go to twit.tv/Twiat, where you'll be able to find all the different ways to have, well, every episode of Twiat dropped into the device of your choice. You want it on your iPod? Yes. You want it on your iPhone? Of course. iPad? Duh. You want to drop it on your Android tablet or phone? You know we can do that. Even your Zombie Zune, your laptop, whatever it might be, we'll find a way to get it to you because we care. Also, did you know that Twiat has a YouTube page? That's right. If you go to youtube.com/Twiat, you'll be able to find not only our episodes, but we're starting to post all of the different segments. That's right. Stuff My IT Guy Says, The Data Closet, Pro Gear, Pro Tip, all the little segments that I pre-record to bring you the knowledge are going to be there for your easy viewing. It's going to be a place not just for fun, but for learning. And you know we're all about learning. Also, we do this show live. That's right. Every Monday at noon, you can go to live.twit.tv and watch us put the show together. You can see the bacon, how the show was put together, the pre-show, the post-show, stuff that doesn't go into the final edit. And let me tell you, that's really the gold. And while you're there, why not drop into the chat room at irc.twit.tv? You can participate in possibly the best thing about Twit, and that is that we are a large temporary community. We're filled with the brightest engineers, the greatest trolls, the funniest people, some of the greatest geeks you'll ever meet. They're in there each and every single week. Also, I want to thank Cyberdog in the chat room for, well, just transcribing everything into our show notes, for being there for each and every episode of Twiat, and to you. That's right, you, the viewer, the listener, the person who keeps coming back week after week after week. We wouldn't have made it to 1 year of shows of Twiat, of the Twiat Riot, without you. And to you, I say, thank you. I'm Father Robert Balaser, and remember, if you want to know what's going on in the Enterprise, just keep Twiat.